Hello, my name's Mrs. Tyler and we're here today to do some biology GCSE revision on the kidney. The kidney is only on triple GCSE, so only need to do this if you're doing triple GCSEs. The kidney then, a lot of the content is straight off A level. All right, it's very, very tricky. There's lots and lots of detail. Today, we're going to go through the basics of how the kidney works, so how substances are filtered out of the blood in the kidney. Then we're going to look at how the concentration of the water is controlled by the role of antidiuretic hormone. And lastly, we're going to have a look at how you treat kidney failure via dialysis and transplants. Transplants and dialysis are often evaluate questions on the GCSE, and the exam board have sneakily put in some higher content talking about the permeability of tubules. So again, I've added that onto this diagram. So lots of detail today. Pause the video when you need to. Let's get started. Let's put the title in the middle then, as usual, which is the kidneys, which is just on triple GCSE. As always, I'm going to divide my page in half vertically. So my paper's in landscape. And then I'm going to separate this one slightly below half, doesn't really matter, about there. And this one, there's quite a big section here and quite a small section there. So I'm going to divide it, I'd say it's probably about 1/4 at the bottom and about 3/4 at the top. So it looks like that. In this one, we're going to look at the substances removed by the kidney. In this one, we're going to look at the role of antidiuretic hormone, ADH, in controlling the water content of the urine. In this one, we're going to look at transplants. It's a way of treating kidney failure. And lastly, we're going to be looking at dialysis. Again, as a way of treating kidney failure. Let's start then with how the kidneys work and how they remove substances from the blood. I'm going to draw what looks like a big kidney bean. It's no surprise that the kidney beans are called kidney beans because they're shaped like a kidney. And I'm going to do 3 pipes coming out of it. One going up, one out to the middle, and the last one going down. This one going down then is going to connect onto the bladder. Bladders. Muscular sac, the sphincter on it, and a pipe coming out the bottom. So this is a kidney, and you've got 2 of them. They have an incredibly rich blood supply, and that's because it's their job to filter the blood. So dirty blood goes in, and I'll tell you what I mean by that in a minute. And it's filtered and cleaned, and the clean blood comes out. So you've got an artery going in and a vein going out. We've also got this 3rd pipe here, and this takes the waste from the dirty blood that's filtered out of the dirty blood to the bladder. So that is called the ureter. And the waste liquid is called urine, and that is stored in the bladder until it's full. When you go for a wee, you urinate and remove the waste. So this is the bladder. This pipe here that comes out is called the urethra. Very similar to ureter, but not. And that's the urine that comes out at the bottom. So the urine contains the waste substances. By those, I mean urea, excess ions like sodium and potassium, and excess water. When we've got too much water in our bodies, then we urinate it out. If you're doing higher level, there was a tricky question on how this works. So I'm going to draw a quick diagram, which isn't on the specification, but we were asked about it. So the kidney is full of tubules called nephrons. And they're hollow tubes. They bend and twist. All right, there is a specific pattern, but I'm not going to bother drawing that today. And this is what the filtrate goes through. The filtrate is what eventually will become the urine. So that becomes urine at the bottom. So the dirty blood goes in the top. And it's squeezed out, it's filtered. So this is where filtration happens at the start. Pen's running out. So lots of stuff is squeezed out of the blood at this point. So lots of water, lots of salt, lots of urea, but also lots of useful things like glucose and amino acids. And you really do not want to wee out your glucose or your amino acids. You want to keep them. So as the filtrate, the liquid that's been squeezed out of the blood, you can think of it as a bit like plasma. It's not the same, but similar, passes along this tubule. This tubule is permeable and it lets substances out. So it lets the glucose out. And there's a blood vessel runs down the side that picks up all the useful things. So it lets the glucose out. It lets the amino acids out. So they pass out of the tubule back into the blood where they can be used. But also, importantly, let some of the water be reabsorbed. And the amount of water that is reabsorbed can be controlled by a hormone. So this reabsorption here is what we're going to look at over here. So let's just have a little think then about the main constituents of urine. So urine contains urea. Urea is the smelly yellow stuff in your urine, and it's made out of excess protein. And that happens in the liver. So any extra protein that you eat that's not converted into muscle mass, it can't be stored, and so your body sends it to the liver. And again, this was on a higher question. It's not really on the specification, but I'm going to mention it here. So protein is taken to the liver where it's turned into ammonia, which is toxic. And so then, to get rid of the ammonia, it's converted into urea. So that's one role of the liver, all right, making urea, getting rid of this extra protein. Another thing that the urine contains is excess ions. So ions, for example, sodium and potassium. If you have too many of them, they cause osmosis, so they cause water to move in funny ways, so they can burst cells or crenate, shrivel cells up. So you need to get rid of extra ions because they cause osmosis and they cause cells to shrivel or to burst. So the wrong ion concentration causes shriveled or burst cells by osmosis. And lastly, for the same reason really, you need to control the amount of water in your body. Water is not only lost through urine, it's lost through sweat, and when you exhale, you breathe out metabolic water in your breath, so you also lose water through sweat and through your lungs. And obviously you drink varying amounts of water during the day and you eat varying amounts of water. So your water levels in your body will fluctuate massively. And again, if you've got too much water in your blood, it will cause cells to swell up and burst. If you've got too little water in your blood, it will cause your cells to shrivel down and crenate. Either way, it's bad news. So you really need to be careful about how much water is in your body, and that's where the antidiuretic hormone comes in. So too much water leads to lysis or bursting of cells. Too little leads to crenation by osmosis again. Let's have a look then at how this water is controlled. Antidiuretic hormone can be shortened to ADH. And antidiuretic hormone makes these tubules more permeable to water. Okay, so it lets more water out. Let's see how that works. I'm going to draw a negative feedback loop. So in the middle, we've got the normal water concentration. And then we're going to have when the water concentration gets too high, in other words, you have a drink. And we're also going to do down here when the water concentration gets too low. When you have a drink then, that water will go through your small intestine and end up in your blood, whereby it's detected by receptors in your brain, and they send a message to your pituitary gland. Remember, the pituitary gland hangs down from the base of the brain and it secretes this hormone, ADH. So the pituitary secretes ADH. But if you've got too much water, then you want less ADH. Let's have a look at how this works. So remember, we've got our tubule. If we've got less ADH, it means we've got less pores for water in it. So we've got a twisted tubule. I'm going to pretend it's just got 2 pores for water in it. So there's only 2 places water can come out back into the blood. So that means less water is reabsorbed into the blood. And what that means is that the water stays inside the tubule and it will end up in your bladder. So you will end up with lots of urine, lots of dilute urine. So let's draw a bladder. And it's full of dilute urine. So I've just put here, tubules less permeable. So if we have a big drink, we want to get rid of any extra water that we don't need. We want some of the water, but any extra water we don't need, we need to get rid of. The brain detects it, sends an impulse to pituitary that secretes less antidiuretic hormone, which means the tubules become less permeable, which means less water moves into the blood, which means it stays in the urine and you make lots of dilute urine. You wee out all that extra water, and therefore the water concentration returns to normal. If it goes the other way, so for example, you've done some exercise, or it's hot and you've sweated, or both, then again, your brain detects it, and again, your pituitary gland alters the amount of ADH it secretes. This time, it secretes more ADH. Let's think about this. Let's draw our tubule again. So if there's more ADH, it means there's more pores in the tubule, which means more water is going to move out of your tubule, and therefore go back into the blood. So lots of places the water can move out. So there's less coming out here. So more water is reabsorbed. Into the blood, because the tubule is more permeable. What that means is if all that water's leaving the urine, this is the urine passing along here and it's leaving, it means there's less water in the urine, which means in the bladder there'll be less urine, and the urine that's there will be more concentrated. So it will be much darker in colour. Okay, so you'll have concentrated urine. And because you're losing less water, it means there's more chance that your water levels will return to normal. That's quite hard. This is off A level. So because the kidneys remove urea, which is toxic, and extra salt and extra water, it's incredibly important that it's sorted out quickly if they go wrong. Because as we've said, if you have too much water or too much salt in your blood, your cells are going to swell up and burst, and that includes the cells in your brain. So you need to treat it. One of the first things that happens then if somebody gets a kidney disease or kidney damage is they go on dialysis. So if your kidneys don't work for whatever reason, then urea and excess, and remember it's not all the salt and all the water, it's only the extra salt and extra water build up in your blood, which is going to cause problems with osmosis and essentially death. So it needs sorting. Dialysis then is a machine that filters the blood for you. But because your liver will keep on making urea and you're probably going to keep on drinking and eating, you need to keep going on dialysis. You can't just have it once, it has to be done regularly. And therefore, it's quite impactful on people's lives. It has to be done every few days, and people find it hard to fit, and it takes a few hours to do, so it's hard to fit in around work. Let's have a look at how dialysis works then. We are going to draw out a dialysis machine. So dialysis filters the blood. So the first thing is that you have to have a needle put it into your arm or any other blood vessel. I know someone that had to have one put in their neck. And the dialysis machine is connected to a large tube that acts like the fake tubules of the kidney. So I'm going to draw this tube and it's going to zigzag down here. Okay, so I'm going to do a narrow turn, a wide turn, a narrow turn, a wide turn, a narrow turn, wide turn, and a narrow turn. Then I'm going to fill in the other side. I'm going to join it back up to the top. So the patient's blood goes in, just like it goes into the tubule in the kidney, and it will be full of urea, extra water and extra salt. And as it passes along this membrane, this partially permeable membrane, it acts like the kidney tubule and it takes out the extra salt and the extra water. So the blood that goes out and back into the body has been cleaned. So this tubule, or this membrane, goes into a container full of a special liquid. Okay, it's called dialysis fluid. And dialysis fluid has the exact right concentration of water and salt that your blood should have. The tube is made out of a partially permeable membrane. So the clean fluid goes in this end. With the correct water, correct ions. The blood passes through that clean fluid, and if there's any extra ions, they move out. So let's do a sodium moving out there. There might be a potassium moves out there. If there's any extra water, that will move out. Equally, if there's not enough water, the water will move in. So it works by osmosis. And the reason it's so long is that it gives plenty of time for the blood to pass through this chamber, dropping off any extra water it needs to, dropping off any extra ions. And so by the time the blood goes out, it's been corrected. So the waste substances move out. So extra water and extra ions move out or diffuse out. In the case of water, that's osmosis, because diffusion of water is osmosis. Also remember, there's no urea in here, so any urea will move out or diffuse out down a concentration gradient into this liquid out of the blood. The dirty liquid then is removed. And that will contain urea, which has been removed, and it will contain the excess water and excess ions. So that's dialysis, using a partially permeable membrane, so using essentially osmosis and diffusion to let extra water and extra ions out of the blood to clean it. Last thing then is transplants. So dialysis is fine, but like we said, it's actually it needs to be done regularly, so it impacts on your life. It takes a lot of time. You have got to be attached to a machine through a blood vessel, so there's a risk of infection, and it can go on for years, so it can also be quite expensive. So actually, if your kidney is completely damaged and completely non-functional, then a good option is to wait for a transplant. So a transplant is when a healthy kidney from a donor is implanted, so it's sewn into your body. And the old one is taken out or removed. Now, obviously, the issue with transplants is that you need a donor. Donors, so somebody that can give you your kidney, can be dead, okay? Or living people can donate a kidney because you've got two kidneys and your body can function fine on one. So people can donate a kidney if they're alive. So the donor, in the case of kidneys, can be dead or alive. If we were talking about a heart transplant, then you've only got one heart. So obviously the donor needs to be dead. Okay. Donor. The problem with a transplant then is that you've got another person's tissue inside you, another person's cells, and your immune system won't recognize it, so it will attack it. So the immune system can attack the new kidney, and this is called rejection. The risk of rejection can be reduced by the donor being a family member. If the family member donates a kidney, then they're more likely to have the same shaped antigens as you on their cells, and therefore your immune system is less likely to attack it. So if somebody has a transplant, then they have to take drugs to reduce the effects of the immune system. They're called immunosuppressants. And that's it. In questions on the kidney, you are often asked to evaluate what happens when the kidneys go wrong. So evaluate dialysis and transplants. Or there are sort of 4-mark questions asking how the kidneys work. So your job now is to read, cover, recite. I know that this antidiuretic hormone, the ADH bit, is hard. So spend a bit of time on that. Like I said, this is straight off A-level. And then have a go at some of those exam questions. Keep an eye out for a Test Your Knowledge video, and I'll see you next time.